What is up, guys? Silver Warrior here, and today I figured that since today is the day where we figured out who was granted the presidency. If that's even the right terminology. I think anyone's ever said granted the presidency in their life. But since today we figured out who won the presidency, it would be a much better way of phrasing that. I decided that I figured I'd make a few political videos, and obviously after what happened before, I'm not going to try to make any more predictions, but I'm just going to discuss a few things I think are quite kind of interesting in politics, and one of them is that how Donald Trump's immigration policy is being extremely exaggerated, and why people need to start to really understand the truth behind his immigration policy and understand what he's really saying, because here's the big thing about these politics is that everyone loves to pretend like they know about politics and make big jokes about politics, because for Clinton it's always, oh, well, she has all these deleted emails, she deleted 1 million emails, where are her emails? And for Trump it's always going to build a giant wall, and he's going to make Mexico pay for it. Okay, first of all, a big thing is that that's not quite what he said. Yeah, yes, he does want to build this wall, and he is going to try to make Mexico pay for it, but people are kind of taking that and applying it to his entire immigration policy, when really all of it is not quite like that. It's not quite as extreme as you think, and some of it will be beneficial to the country, some of it will not be. Now, building this gigantic wall, I honestly don't see happening, just because, did you say get the backing for that? I really think would be extremely tough. Maybe he could pull it off, but because our House of Representatives and Senate are both Republican dominated now. However, an idea like that is not the most conservative option. A lot of Republicans disagree with Trump on many of his ideals, and that is one of them, considering the simple fact that that's much more extreme than what needs to be done. That's a very extreme way of handling immigration. Now, another thing in his immigration policy is that when people say that he's going to send every single immigrant home, people make jokes it's like, oh, well, no more Mexicans are going to be around here. That's not going to happen. He wants to send back people who came into the country illegally, which, when you think about it, what is so wrong about returning people who snuck into our country, broke our law, chances are broke their country's law, and to top it all off, are taking jobs away from Americans who need them, Americans who, and I know one of the big arguments is that, well, they take the jobs we're not willing to take. Guess what? If you look at some of the lower end jobs, some of them are dominated by minorities, but look at farming, for example. That still has a very high percentage of white people who work on farms, yet immigrants come in and take those jobs, and it's just expected that we should, just be like, all right, well, that's fine, they can come into our country and just steal our work, and it should be no problem. That's just really not fair, because the other thing that I have a huge problem with is the fact that immigrants who sneak into the country are basically saying to the immigrants who worked hard to get into the country that, well, who cares what you did? I know that you worked hard to get into this country to learn English, if that wasn't your first language, and to accustom yourself to American lifestyle, but we're going to just sneak into the country, be unwilling to learn any English, and to top it all off, we're going to siphon your tax money so that we can have it and steal your jobs. That's ridiculous. Something needs to be done about it. And everyone who complains about Trump's plans on immigration, what do they have to say about it? What are their thoughts? How are they going to help? I would love to know. I'd love to hear from someone who completely just is like, yeah, we shouldn't do anything about these illegal immigrants. Well, what's your plan? How you want to fix it? To do nothing, or to have no stance on it? Because what is that doing exactly? That's just allowing the problem to continue and not addressing it. And here's the thing. By Trump saying something like he wants to build a giant wall, maybe that's not going to happen. In fact, that's probably not going to happen. But it brings back up the problem of immigration instead of just letting it fall to the wayside, because a lot of people love to do that. Love to just, problems that we don't want to deal with, just let them, pretend like they don't exist. And that's just ridiculous as well. We have a problem with illegal immigration. That's a big problem. And to just pretend like it doesn't exist is simply ludicrous because it's there. It's a problem that we all have, in this country as Americans that we need to address. It's something that definitely needs to be addressed. Now, a big thing that I do think about trying to get rid of every single illegal immigrant is that I do think that one of the things that would happen, and it's something I said before, is that if you try to get rid of every single illegal immigrant in a mass exodus, for one, what would happen is I think that a lot of people who are in this country illegally will start having anchor babies, and I know that's now an offensive term, but guess what? That's what they are. If you're having a child just to stay in the country, it is an anchor baby. And I think that's one thing that would go on is a lot of people would have children that they don't really want, but they'd have them just to stay in the country. And then who knows what would happen to them. And I think that that would start to fill up our orphanages as well, because I think a lot of these children would be with parents that couldn't care for them properly, and they would end up filling up those orphanages. And I also think that another thing that would happen is we would lose a large part of some of our workforces that are dominated by Mexicans, who a lot of times are illegal and working under the table. But I think that we would lose a lot of that workforce, and I think that some of the workforce is important. I think what would end up happening is that the jobs that they would open up, and there would be a lot of jobs for Americans, but in the time that they weren't being filled, these important jobs wouldn't be getting done, and a small monopoly would probably form on that market for a short time before the jobs were filled, because you have to still go through a process. Now, if you're working under the table, I don't think that the guy's going to be like, having you fill out a resume and, like being like, all right, we'll check in your full extensive background, because if they're allowing illegal immigrants to work for you anyway, then obviously those are the type of jobs that could be filled very, very quickly. But the big thing is that would lead to then probably another reform on the job market, and that would take away under the table jobs, which I guess it depends on where you stand and whether that's a good or bad thing, but a lot of these jobs are requiring a lot of workers, and losing them all would probably slow production in the U.S. and cause prices of our goods to rise. So I think that if we are going to try to get rid of illegal immigrants, you have to consider, what is the importance of their job, and I really don't think that you should take away all of them at once. I think, maybe certain groups, and I think that if you let's say I guess there's probably not the best records on them if they're an illegal immigrant, but if they're if they're actively committing a crime in the country, I'd say those are the immigrants we should get rid of first, before we get rid of the immigrants that are just working every day, and they might have been illegal, but they still are trying to work every day, still trying to learn the language. I think that those are the ones that you might want to kind of not forget about, but not get rid of immediately. The ones that aren't taking up all of our welfare, and the ones that aren't allowing, or not allowing, the ones that aren't committing crimes themselves actively. I think that, the more dangerous immigrants, because Trump going and stereotyping all illegal immigrants as, dangerous criminals who are, drug addicts, is probably not true, because a lot of immigrants are just trying to create a better life for themselves, but they can't simply afford to come into the country legally, because it does cost money to get a passport, and it can be very difficult, and especially with the meager pay that you could earn in Mexico. So I think that that's a little bit ridiculous to say, and I think therefore that you really need to prioritize who's more important to get rid of first, because I think that there's plenty of illegal immigrants who still are trying to be good people. It's just that they had to commit a crime to get it into the country. I mean, because nobody faults the hundreds of thousands of people who leave North Korea, or who illegally leave North Korea to get into South Korea. Okay, nobody faults them, which is a little bit different. It's a little bit more extreme. That's a dictatorship, and North Korea has no legal way that you can really leave, especially not into South Korea, because they're, basically enemies. I mean, between the Korean War and the high tensions on their border that are still there even to this day, they're definitely, they're basically not lining up to say, oh yeah, please go into South Korea, because they want to keep their people under their control. They don't want the message getting out even more about how horrible the conditions are, because the more people that figure out what's going on in North Korea, the more action there is going to be to try to stop it. But at the same time, it's almost a similar situation in Mexico for certain people, because Mexico has a lot less laws than we do when it comes to businesses that can basically smother people, by forcing them to barely earn enough money just to live, let alone get ahead in life, which is a big problem the United States used to have as well during when industrialization was starting to really take off, and a lot of people were in the country, as very poor people who couldn't end up ever raising enough money to go and stake a claim from the Homestead Act. So that was just kind of like a false dream for them, and instead we end up stuck working in factories for like pennies an hour, which today still translates to maybe 50 cents an hour, and would end up inevitably being in an endless cycle of debt. So that's kind of where I guess I stand on his thoughts on immigration, but I definitely think that some of his plans are really something to consider, just because some of the stuff that is going on with illegal immigration really needs to stop. Should immigrants just be allowed to, should people just be allowed to sneak into the country continuously still now? No. Should we build a $500 billion wall again? No. We need to kind of hit a middle ground, I think. But Donald Trump's the only one who's really willing to address it. What did Obama do about immigration? Basically nothing. He, if anything, allowed more immigrants to the country. He embraced illegal immigration, so he didn't make every illegal immigrant legal. I know that that's not true. That's exaggerated as well. But he did put in plans to make a lot of them legal in the country. So I really think that we need to hit a middle ground. But like I said, Trump's the only one who's willing to bring up the issue of illegal immigration. So I guess that's where I stand on it myself as well. But I do hope you enjoyed the video. That is it for this one. Peace, love, and much respect.